we've had in a bit. I think we have had that before, but we've had years where it's been in the mid twos, high twos. My concern is the expense.
Yes.
We have almost 2/3 revenue is gobbled up in expenses. Is that?
Well, as I mentioned during my presentation, that we have a large number of new initiatives, and with new initiatives, you have a best guess estimate as what they're going to cost. And I know that the city needs to have finite planning numbers. So I worked with Jose to establish that we should use very conservative numbers. So those numbers and the expenses are very conservative to ensure that we can meet or exceed those.
So are those numbers, the expense to revenue ratio, very different from your prior 3 years?
For the new initiatives, yes. For the
I'm more so focused overall.
Overall,
The expense of the operation as compared to the revenues generated.
well, as you can see, it from the past, if you can go back to the, nope, if I guess forward one. As you can see, it kind of varies, but it's approximately, I'd say, somewhere in the neighborhoods between 1/2 and 2/3 traditionally. I'm looking to not only increase growth, but I'm also looking to reduce expenses. And that's something that, over the next year or two, I'm looking for ways to optimize our operations.
Councilman Kennedy.
If I may, through the chair, what is the industry average on revenue versus expenses?
I don't have the information right now, sir. We can get that for you, though.
Because as we evaluate the mayor's proposal versus the performance that we're showing here, I mean, obviously the revenue numbers, and $3 million is nothing to sneeze at. I'm basing my projection on my numbers versus whether good deal or bad deal based on assuming $3 million a year in revenue. I'm just wondering though, could you offer us what you believe those expenses are going to be going forward, and then what you project the revenue is based on your expenses? I mean, are they going to remain roughly 2/3 of cost, or 2/3 of your net revenue?
I would say they're going to go down at this point, because again, the numbers I have in for this year are very conservative because there's a large number, I mean, well over $1 million worth of new expenses from new initiatives. So those numbers were, again, very conservative to ensure that I would provide the $3.2 million to you. My biggest concern is that when the parking authority says we're going to deliver $3.2 million, we deliver $3.2 million or better. I want you to be able to count on that money.
All right, so your numbers are conservative. So you're saying there could be more than $3.2 million in next year's budget and in your future projections?
Correct.
If I can say something here, first of all, this budget was constructed before the thought of transferring the Hartford Parking Authority assets to the pension fund.
I completely understand that.
Which budget?
The budget you're seeing now.
Right, in the supplemental that was submitted for the budget book,
Yes.
right?
That's
This is consistent with these numbers. Right, okay.
Yes.
There's some operating costs too that, Eric has been here since October, and things that we've talked about as recently as today is our numbers came in for our healthcare plan, doubled in price. And so, we as he's digging down deeper into it, there are some of those initiatives that he's been charged with when he came to kind of look at and see where we're at. A lot of it is the personnel costs. I'm sorry.
Are you part of the city's? Are you part of the city's healthcare plan? And if you can't, and you can go back and answer that later in a budget question. The other question I want to have is with the new items you're bringing on board, your new that raised your revenue, you raised your costs. What are your projected increases in revenue from those expenditures, from those new programs going forward? You can give me that information, or give the council, that information in budget questions. And that way I can answer no more questions.
Okay. Just to answer the question, Councilman, on healthcare, we choose to be part of the city's plan, and there are 2 levels of the plan. And Eric was reporting earlier today that most of our employees choose the higher level plan. And so we're going to start looking at that and talking to the employees about, kind of showing them what it's costing the authority and what options might be out there, and do some shopping and see if we can come up with a better deal.
Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Good evening. Could you also provide to the council a detail of your expenses compared to last year, so we can see where the new initiatives, what they're costing, and how that's varying from last year's expenses? Thank you.
Yes.
Dave, you're done?
It's lovely music, though.
I would also like to say, while we're waiting for...
I'll speak
council-
louder so you can hear me as we kind of move forward. Oh, okay, he's back.
If I may,
Yeah, that's all we had to do.
one of our garages was also greatly affected by the Affordable Care Act, and they lost their insurance, and they had to go out and get new insurance. Just like a lot of people, their insurance policy was canceled, and they got new insurance. And for their this current year's budget, I believe that it was supposed to be $81,000, and their budget now is $127,000. And they're currently working with us to look for new insurance providers, but they needed to get insurance rapidly. So next year, we're hoping that both ours and theirs will be significantly lower.
Councilman DeJesus.
Hey, good evening. I just want to go over the moving and lease 124. So is this a lease that you guys are going into, or is this just an estimate of what it would cost you to move or to lease?
It's a conservative estimate. Right now, we have to be out by July, and obviously, next year, if we do move, there's obviously moving costs associated with that, infrastructure costs, fit out of the new location, a couple months rent to rent it while you're fitting it out, that kind of a thing. That's the bounding number that we believe would be cost. We are currently also working with the state to get into a lease in our current location, which is the most economical way to do it. However, we need to look at the long-term cost of that.
All right. My following question is, what are the lots and garages that you guys manage? Have a listing of that?
Yes. In the presentation, there is 200 Church Street, which is across the street from the XL Center. That's approximately 1,300 cars.
Page is that on the
Go way back to the beginning. Yep. Oh, one more, two more.
Page
There you
4
go.
or 5.
Those are
So the Church Street garage, it's a very large garage, approximately 1,300 cars. It's the one that's right behind the Hilton. We have the Matt garage, which is kind of tucked in between the Stilts building and the Hartford stage. We have the library parking deck. Of the approximately 90 spaces, 37 of those are paid. The others are reserved. Next slide, please. We have these 4 surface lots. The Sheldon Street lot is approximately 260 spaces. Of that, about 100 plus are for municipal parkers. We have the auxiliary lot, which is the skinny little lot down the street from there. That's about 70 spaces. That's also municipal parkers. We have 58 Chapel, which is actually a subsection of a very large parking lot that is actually managed by one operator, but it's 7 pieces of property. The city has bought back one piece of that property, and that's about 140, 150 cars. Depends on how the fence gets put up. And 1212 Main is also known as the dirt lot, or 12B. That's behind the, I guess now Radisson, and that holds approximately 400 spaces.
All right, quick question. Who manages the 58 Chapel?
Right now it's Laz.
Is that considered lot 12B? Is that lot
12B, no, 12B is 1212 Main. That's the dirt lot, and that is run by RNG until we take over.
And that's here, right, you said?
That's,
that on-
yes, that's the large 5-sided lot.
For how long you guys manage that lot?
We are currently taking it over. Right now, it's still underneath RNG as part of a city's lease, and which will expire, what has expired, and we're currently in the process of turning over. Once we establish an operator and a security personnel, we will notify them of their 60-day, like a 60-day warning, termination warning, and we will take over within the 61st day.
The reason why those lots came to us is based in the slide that Eric has in here under our authority origins, that CRDA required that by state law, that any leased parking entity had to be under the authority of the parking authority. And that was made clear by CRDA, and through Corporation Council, the decision was to transfer it. So right now, we're not operating them per se. They have their residual operators, but those leases have terminated. So we put an RFP out to get kind of a lay of the land of, they're not bids, but proposals in, and we're in the process of reviewing the proposals, scoring them, and making an award. So that's how that happened.
Perfect. My follow-in question is probably concerning you guys and I think management and budget. Have we done an analysis as to, we're talking about a sale of the Hartford Parking Authority, or the assets that you guys have, part of the built-in budget. Have we made an analysis for any revenue that we could possibly lose through the state statute that they mentioned, the section 32606? Because I guess if we don't have a parking authority, the CRDA, right? It will not be able to fund us. Has that been taken into consideration? Is there any analysis that's being done? If we do sell it, what would be the net loss from those funds?
I believe the legislative language is that any parking public parking that the HPA manage, meaning not the city. In the mayor's recommended budget, the intent is to leave the surface lots under the management of HPA.
Yeah, because I'm reading it, and actually it makes mention of the city of Hartford in the actual statute. Unless or until the town and city of Hartford has created a municipal parking authority in accordance to Chapter 10 and has transferred or scheduled thereof in legally binding way the rights and responsibility of municipality for all municipality-owned, operated parking facilities as defined by 7-202. And I think that also includes structures, not just parking lots. So I think the administration should look at that closely and try to provide us with some numbers as to what would be the effects if we were to lose that funding from the state that are put through the CRDA. I think that's an important piece to determine, because they have been very instrumental in bringing in funds for the apartments in the downtown area. And
Well, just to be clear, I don't think we can, at this point, do this in a way that's not compliant with the state law and the CRDA legislation. We already have commitments for funding. We have funding in place. And so whatever, Corporation Council and our advisor can tell us otherwise, but that's my working premise for the council, that it can only be done in a way that's consistent with state law as it exists now.
Exactly. So I think that's an important thing, but I still think we should still do an analysis to see what would be the consequences if we were to go forward on this deal, and we did not go by this state statute, to see what the revenues loss may potentially be.
Mr. President, if I may, if I understand your question correctly, Councilman De Jesus, any analysis to respond to your question would not be a good use of our time, as it is not being contemplated. There is not a scenario that we're evaluating that would have the HPA not continuing to manage parking assets in Hartford. And thus not jeopardizing the CRDA funding, because the HPA would continue to manage and operate parking assets in Hartford.
I'm not sure if I understand then. So the proposed deal that is in front of us, as I understand it, we'll sell it to the pension commission, the assets?
We're working up a variety of options to provide perspective, but it is the intent that there are certain assets that would be transferred to the pension fund. And as I said just a moment ago, to simplify it, it would be the garages and not the surface lots. The surface lots would remain with HPA. And in turn, HPA would continue to manage parking assets in Hartford and thus not jeopardize the CRDA funding. As the council president indicated, we'll get confirmation from council that my understanding is correct, but it does not provide a scenario where the HPA would not be continuing to manage parking assets in Hartford and thus not jeopardizing the CRDA funding.
All right, can you please, I mean, this is, my question is, and I know you, this is, what are the assets that you guys are factoring in? So,
The garages.
because when you say parking authority assets, one would think that it's all the assets that are currently are operating or controlling. But you're saying in this scenario or in this snapshot that it's not all now. So it's not all assets. Although that's the way that is actually written in the on the budget book presentation and the message that all assets from the parking authority will be sold off. But this is different from what you're saying.
Well, if I remember the mayor's budget message correctly and the original paragraph under the Hartford Parking Authority in the detail section of the mayor's
Excuse me.
recommended budget.
If I could just cut you off, it's probably more productive to take the time to describe what the mayor is currently proposing. You know, you and I have talked about this a little bit, and there's clearly a lot of confusion. And so rather than parsing the words of the mayor's budget message, this may be a good opportunity, and if you're not prepared to do so now,
Mr. President, if I may, I do believe it is premature. We are continuing to work towards analysis to provide council with a perspective of what various scenarios may look like and what the potential transaction might look like. To close the loop on Councilman De Jesus' question, I do not believe that the mayor's budget recommendation includes the word all. It says assets managed by, and we can, of course, debate that. But as the council president has requested, the administration, along with the pension commission, whose effort is led by the treasurer, are working towards analysis that will demonstrate a stronger estimate or potential transaction benefit for both sides, meaning the city and the city's retirement fund. We are evaluating not less than 3 scenarios. One is contemplating the privatization, if you will, but that privatization with our pension fund for the garages managed by the Hartford Parking Authority. That is to provide us with a perspective of what the potential maximum benefit may be. But the mayor is currently expecting that, or hoping that we will be able to arrive at a revenue sharing concept that is much simpler, but provides the proverbial win-win, if you will, the win for the city through the ability to balance what is a roughly $14.5 million budget gap, and the pension commission benefiting from a return on their investment.
Just for clarity, I think I do agree that the message does not say all. So what I want to say is that the state statute says
Councilman?
all
Councilman,
parking.
we're going to have to work through the legal question. I don't think they know the answer yet.
No, I think, no, but he's saying that, I just want to clear my statement. the statement of the mayor does not include the word all. The only time that the word all, I mentioned the word all is in the state statute. The state statute requires all parking structures and parking lots to be transferred to the parking authority. That's the only time I said all. That's only through the definition of the state statute, not that the mayor said all assets.
Okay, we're
Thank you.
gonna move on.
Just
All
clearly.
right, we're gonna move on. Councilman Deutsch. Oh, Councilman Anderson, then Councilman Deutsch.
Chairman, my question goes back to Mr. Boone, and looking at the residential parking permit program, the rolling out of the northeast section Rosemont Street area. When you say Rosemont Street area, are you including the surrounding streets, Cambridge, Ashford, those kinds of situations, or are you just targeting Rosemont Street in particular? First part of my question.
Well, the primary area is obviously Rosemont Street, but then there are ancillary streets off of that, in that they're affected by the entertainment in that area that we're looking at. So ultimately, the final decision will be through the residents in the NRC themselves, that they will help us pick those streets. So again, it's not just Rosemont, but that is the primary focus, and then there will be some ancillary streets off of that.
Okay. Second part of my question, Mr. Chairman, through you. The entertainment district, we had a brief conversation at a couple of the committee meetings. Will this be also in conjunction with some kind of planning to do some sort of parking arrangement or some kind of parking opportunity to gain some sort of revenue for the Uptown Entertainment District? Because on the weekends, that is very congested, and depending on certain events up in that area.
At this point, we do not have any assets, or the city does not have any land immediately available for that. However, we are working with the local leaders and local businessmen to try to at least set up an interim parking arrangement to help keep people off the street, to help people get out of the neighborhoods.
Right.
And if the opportunity does arise, we're definitely open to that. But at this point, we don't have any plans.
Thank you.
Councilman Deutsch.
Thank you, and through you. Let's see, I try to phrase these as questions. You agree that basically you have presented a comprehensive view tonight of the various needs of parking in terms of public service to the city generally, taking into account many factors beyond the simple revenue figures. That is the planning, the coordination for economic development, some of the amenities and the consideration given to users, whether residents of the city or visitors. Now, a couple of things I haven't heard mentioned, which I imagine you've taken into account, are, for instance, other modes of transportation, which will be coming shortly in coming years. For instance, bicycle, we're trying to encourage that, walkability, and of course the mass transit, which will very soon be operative here in the city through Tiger Grants and the busway and all that. So I would say it's hard for me to conceive of any outside agency or private contracting agency giving a view as comprehensive as all of you who live and work here in this area may have, in terms of your familiarity with some of the needs and the drawbacks in your meetings, Madam Chairman, with neighborhood groups and so on. So I say that in a very, very positive sense, that throughout the presentation, you've illustrated how this would integrate some of the needs in the city rather than simply having a revenue maximizing approach. So within that,
You have a question?
yes,
Okay.
getting towards it. Do you feel that well, here, just to add that the question that was just raised by Councilman De Jesus and others as to whether we should even spend time this weekend contemplating some of these other arrangements, if indeed the CERTA agreement is mandatory upon us in order to maintain the relationship, as you said, In other words, regardless of what the mayor said, if we feel, as the council president and others mentioned, that we're bound to adhere to the CERTA agreements, then am I correct? Here's the question, that we needn't spend our time this weekend thinking of 3 or 4 different alternatives if indeed it's mandated to continue with HPA management, which no one has expressed dissatisfaction with. So the first question is, do you see it from your point of view and yours as binding upon us that HPA will continue to manage all of these assets, all, as Councilman DeJesus mentioned, so that we needn't entertain the multiplicity of possibilities, dividing this, the garages from the on-street, the revenue, and so on. Can you answer that?
Okay, so you'd like the parking authority to ask, is it worth her time this weekend to grapple with this?
Well, I'd like all of us to ask that, because if indeed,
I guess from my perspective is we don't own the assets.
yes.
So we're the operator and maintainer of the assets, and trying to be out of the discussion but kind of clear is that we manage what is considered a city asset. And if the pension commission is a city entity, then we're managing city assets. So it becomes a business decision and a policy decision and something that's way over our pay grade. We manage the assets that we're given, and we try very hard to have a delicate balance between the value added, the planning, the visionary, and the actual produce revenue for the city. So I guess my answer would be, it doesn't matter what I think. What happens is we manage what the city asset has. And I apologize if I confuse the conversation. My only point about the CRDA is that I was perceiving people were saying, well, how did you get those lots? Like, how did they come to you? So that was the reason why I brought that up, is just the lots came to us because of that issue, unrelated to other issues. I don't think you can tie them together in my
Okay,
limited
so through you,
opinion.
then the question is, bringing in the question, the issue of those lots. Do you see, or does the HPA or the board or the CEO see ways of increasing the revenue stream from some of those lots under our own management locally, rather than, again, contracting them out? Because we're all looking for increased revenue streams, and if we're fortunate enough in developing that land north of 84 shortly, of course it won't happen tomorrow, can you give us an optimistic view that even on those lots that we, HPA and the city, can increase revenue, being optimistic in that way, to help us with a more predictable, even though spread out revenue stream?
I do feel that the parking authority.
Don?
Swap out. I do feel that the parking authority can optimize and improve the revenue stream of these lots. Right now, the city is bringing in approximately, I believe it's around $140,000 between these two lots from the current operators. I know I can at least meet and beat that. And over the next year to 2 years, we're looking for ways to not only get those lots up and running and get them running efficiently, to improve the utilization of our garages, which right now are both oversold. But we also in the evenings would like to have people parking in the evenings in those garages, and we're working for new ways and working through with different business partners to expand the utilization of those garages in the evening. And on street, we are also looking for ways to mitigate this new expense that we have from the operations and maintenance. So over the next year, a big focus of mine is specifically for on street is to expand the revenue stream from on-street without greatly increasing the rates through the guidance of the Nelson Nygaard analysis that is being worked on with development services.
So thank you. So finally, just to conclude, in a sense, you're offering a somewhat optimistic view, especially with the hopes for downtown development, the state purchasing that pair of buildings, the possible expansion of Capital Community College and some other downtown development. We're getting a view that if we maintain and keep this asset for the city through HPA, we may look forward to a steadily improving revenue stream as opposed to if we sell it or transfer it, including a private operator which takes 50% of the income, let's say, the gross income, which I've heard proposed through the mayor or the treasurer. We may have to look forward to that, especially if CERTA requires that we do so. So I'm asking whether we can be optimistic even this weekend by holding on to it, even though it's not a windfall this budget year.
I can't speak to anything more than the parking authority's ability to operate and improve its performance. I can't speak to the deal or the terms and conditions of any kind of sale or revenue stream transfer.
The surface lots that are being transferred, have those revenues been factored into your 14-15 budget projections?
Correct, in a very conservative manner, namely because we don't know exactly when we're going to take them over. And we also don't know if there's any hidden expenses. These lots are severely degraded, and beyond capital expenses, there may be some operational hiccups due to the severe nature of these physical conditions of these lots. So we do have, I believe I put in for a net operating profit of $145,000, with the full expectation that that number will be greatly increased next year.
Councilwoman Jennings.
Yes, Mr. Boone, you talked about the amnesty program. Do you know how much money is currently how much money we currently have in outstanding tickets?
Currently on our balance sheet, it is $20.3 million.
How much?
20.3. Through our recent research with the new optimization software, I've discovered approximately $7 million of suspect revenues. That, namely, a large portion of that are just errant tickets, or tickets that were paid back in 2000 and before the parking authority assumed on-street control. And if apparently back then when you paid your ticket at a certain time frame, you got a discount, an $11 discount. The $11 stayed on the books times thousands of tickets.
So are you suggesting of the 20.3 million, possibly as much as 7 million should be taken off?
Correct.
And that it's probably 13 million? Okay.
One of the goals we have, and it's being led by our treasurer, Rex Fowler, is to get that number, and through the software Eric brought in, now we can quantify it, to get that number and actually have on our sheet what is the number. And some of it, as Eric talked about his work with the Superior Courts, is going to allow us not to grow that number, because we can bulk send tiny little tickets to the courthouse. They can process them, and it'll make it more efficient, more able for us to collect those. But our goal is, from the commissioners, get that number real and stop it from growing. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. My next question is, what portion of the money, if recovered, will come to the city?
So when the current collections is very expensive, and I believe we have a very economical rate. Right now, it's any ticket that is below younger than 3 years, newer than 3 years, it's 30%. Any ticket that's between 3 and 5 years is 40%, and any ticket that's above.
A lot of competition.
That's above 5 years, older than 5 years is 50%. So that's the cost, that's the fee associated with it. So based on that $13 million, assuming that's real money, we're projecting somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 to $8 million would actually come back to the city if we collected all of it, which is a pretty optimistic.
So if you collected, say, 13 million, then you said about 7 would come to the city,
Between 7 and 8, yes.
and the balance would go to,
The collector.
pardon me?
The collector.
Okay, the collector. All right, so you're talking about getting a private collector in to collect the monies?
We already have one through our on-street vendor. So essentially, we have an on-street vendor, Republic, who does the on-street enforcement, as you see, the parking ambassadors with their red coats. And they also manage our collections. So there's no payment, we do not pay for them until they collect on a ticket. So it's commission-based. So depending on the age of the ticket, they collect a service fee, and that service fee actually goes out to a third-party debt collection agency that they've utilized. They're actually, I believe, on their second or third debt collection agency because they were not meeting our demands. So they've been very responsive to us in trying to get these citations collected.
All right, thank you. And as a piggyback through you, Mr. Chair, to respond to Kyle Anderson's or follow up on Kyle Anderson's comment about the North Hartford Entertainment District, is it going to be legal for people who own property around the North Hartford Entertainment District, if they own, let's say, the Subway shop and maybe the Star Restaurant or the, one of the other people who have lots, surface lots, would it be legal for them to rent parking spaces to people in the entertainment district?
That's something that we're working through right now, is to see, A, who's interested, and B, what are the legalities associated with that. Down in Park Street, we were able to work out it wasn't necessarily a lease. However, what it was that the other parking establishments would help pay the maintenance on that lot if they would open it up. So a private partner worked with businesses in the Park Street area to essentially, if they helped him cover his maintenance fees on that lot, he would allow employers and employees to park there, which is the issue down on Park Street, is getting employers off the street so that customers could come and shop. So there may be some kind of a relationship that way. So there's opportunity to involve the private sector.
We're gonna wrap it up.
I just have one last question then. What happens to the cars of residents that have been booted when they cannot pay their tickets? Who gets those cars?
So after 24 hours, it becomes boot eligible, or excuse me, tow eligible, just like the current process we have now. So essentially, the current process that we have now becomes enacted, and the car is towed. I believe it sits for, I think, at least 30 days, but not more than 90 days, as in accordance with state law. And at that point, the towing facility auctions off the vehicle, and the proceeds of that go to, after their expenses, goes to the city, or namely HPD. It does not come to us.
What is your operating cost per space for on-street parking, and what is the cost for garage?
We're actually in the process of developing that right now. I do not have that number for this year's budget. So we are in the process of developing that. I can get that to you, Council President.
Okay. What do you think your timing is on that?
Next week.
Thank you. We are adjourned.